tuning into Roll Call. The movie you selected is Bad Boys 2, starring Will Smith.
What's up, mother bitches? Part 2. Welcome to Roll Call, the show where two childless millennials gush over movies and follow an actor's journey from their early years throughout their blockbuster hits.
Yes, because we're all chasing the power trip you felt when you just get to cause chaos in the city of Miami on the way to Blockbuster.
And I might have never been in a Ferrari, but back in 97, there were a few times when my dad would take me to Blockbuster in his Corvette, and that made me feel like a real baller.
That is like perfect suburban America.
Dude, he loved that car. It was a black, like, 96 Corvette.
Well, so much about cars, but this is not Too Fast, Too Furious, people. We're talking about the 2003 film Bad Boys 2. And I totally forgot to introduce myself. I'm Bria, and just so you know, this is about to get reckless, stupid, and dangerous. We ride together, we die together. Bad Boys for life.
Bria, can you say that at my funeral? Can you get up and speak and say, we ride together, we die together, bad girls for life?
That's assuming that you die before me.
I probably will.
Yes. So, like I said, we're talking about Bad Boys 2, the sequel to the original Bad Boys from 1997. So cue that Nelly and Diddy track. Oh. And let's take a trip back to July of 2003. Simone, what was poppin' on the planet Earth in the United States in 2003?
Man, I have to look up when that song was released, but I almost want to say our pussies were popping. All you ladies pop yo pussies like this, but we were all underage, so let's not paint that picture just yet. But I'm pulling my summer 2003 pop culture from an Entertainment Weekly article written by Mary Solosi, and it was called "Why the Summer of 2003 Was a Shining Moment in Pop Culture History."
You know what I see?
What?
Two of my favorite things in 2003, but let's continue.
I know. Did you click the link?
Yeah.
So this article was written in 2018, so at that point, 2003 was 15 years ago, but now it's almost 20 years ago. We're about 19 years away from summer of 2003, which is offensive. But let's start with the month of May. We're in May right now. The summer started off strong in 2003 with the release of the Lizzie McGuire movie. This one went to theaters.
Hey now.
Sing to me, Paolo.
I made it. Oh my god, I have that on DVD. So every preteen girl's probably favorite movie.
Yes. In other news, we have a crucial emo moment, or an e-moment, because Fall Out Boy's "Take This to Your Grave" album debuted.
Is this the one with "Sugar We're Going Down"? Or that's before? No, that's Under the Cork Tree. My bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was, I think, like their first album.
They are emo gods.
Yes. True legends. Speaking of legends, America's Next Top Model also debuted for the first time into our television screens in May. And lastly, Robert Schwartzman, who I think is Jason Schwartzman's brother, his band Rooney released its first debut album.
Oh, Rooney! They were on the OC, and so absolutely love Rooney, Blue Side, all All the things.
The movie Justin to Kelly, which commemorates the first two finalists and semifinalists on American Idol, was released in June. And although it was a flop, it's still like a pop culture icon. We also get the fifth installment of a Harry Potter movie, which was Order of the Phoenix. And Beyonce Knowles went from just a singer from a girl group to making it on her own, and she released her solo debut of Dangerously in Love on June 23rd.
She was the moment. She is an icon. She is a legend. Still the moment.
She is the moment. Also in theaters, Charlie's Angels 2 Full Throttle was released on June 27th. In July, Legally Blonde 2 was released, following closely behind Charlie's Angels. And July released one of Vanity Fair released that iconic magazine cover that had literally everybody on it, from Amanda Bynes, the Olsen twins, Mandy Moore, Hilary Duff, Alexis Bledel, Evan Rachel Wood, Raven Simone, Lindsay Lohan, all three Harry Potter kids, Aaron Carter, Shia LaBeouf. It's a little creamy, to be honest. And when I say creamy,
I was gonna say it's white.
It's very white. Even Raven Simone is very they really toned her skin down, I feel like.
But Raven's light skin, so
yeah.
Solange was in there, I believe.
Ooh.
And I believe Kyla Pratt was inside as well. But yeah, they could have spiced it up a little bit more.
Agreed. But I mean, the only caveat is that it has just to early aughts fashion to its T. We're talking long baby doll nightgowns over jeans, chunky belts, the satiny colory, pearly pink, low rise jeans, that preppy sporty look that we were talking about last season with J-Lo.
Mini skirts, ruffly
lots
things.
Of ruffles, pleats, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then wrapping it up in August, we get the premiere of The OC, the show The Newlyweds with Nick and Jessica, Chicken of the Sea.
I swear.
We also get Lindsay Lohan in Freaky Friday with Jamie Lee Curtis, and the coming of age movie with Evan Rachel Wood of 13. And then we also get the DCOM, the Cheetah Girls, baby. So that's, pretty much, there's a few more things, honorable mentions in the article, but it's a pretty good summary of what life was like. I turned 13 that year, and I just remember seeing all of those movies in the theater. I lived that whole summer experience. I was a little late to the OC train because it felt like a little bit too grown up for me, but Leah watched it. And so that whole article is pure nostalgia.
What does it say about me that I was 11? Welcome to the OC, bitch. Chino. Yeah. I loved that show. Very big part of my preteen teendom was very OC centered, and it introduced me to amazing music. So, if anything, listen to the soundtracks.
Well, Bria, and speaking of soundtracks, can I have a moment to talk about the soundtrack that was inspired by this movie?
No, you may not. No, I'm kidding. Of course, we would be doing a disservice if we did not talk about this soundtrack.
Yes. So, all right. So, Bad Boys 2 has a pretty boppin' soundtrack. We have talked about this quite a few times. I had mentioned this, that I kept on getting some of the songs confused of what was an official Bad Boy song and what was a fever dream that I had. But there's a great interview by P. Diddy, who did an interview for NBC, and he talks specifically about the artist that he worked with and kind of his whole vision behind this album. He also talks a little bit about his show Making the Band, which was taking off at this time, and this was post him and Jennifer Lopez, so he was already dating someone else. But the interview is kind of funny because the interviewer is like a little flirtatious and is trying to like get him to like spill the beans and kind of open up, and he's just like not having it. But the Bad Boys 2 original motion picture soundtrack has about 16 songs on it, with an intro with various artists. We have Show Me Your Soul, La 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 with Jay-Z. Show Me Your Soul, sorry, has Diddy, Lenny Kravitz, and Pharrell Williams. We got Shake Your Tail Feather with Nelly and Diddy and Murphy Lee. Girl, I'm a Bad Boy featuring Fat Joe and P. Diddy and Dre. Keep Giving Your Love to Me with Beyonce. Flip Side featuring Freeway. Gangsta Shit with Snoop Dogg and Loon. Pretty Girl Bullshit by Mario Winans featuring Thank you, sorry. Featuring Foxy Brown. Relax Your Mind with Loon. Don't Mean with Mary J. Blige. And the rest of the songs just kind of have that blanketed various artists, but we have God Sent You, Why, Shot You, and Wanna Be G's featuring Sharitha Lynch.
Where are you looking at this? Spotify?
Yes, this is a Spotify. Is this not the right one?
I mean, no, there's just some missing. There's a Justin Timberlake song called Love Don't Love Me.
Right.
Why is also by Da Band, which is the first band created from Diddy's Making the Band. It's like a rap band.
You're right.
That's the season he made them go walk to Brooklyn
to get cheesecake.
Yes. And then there's also a song, Realist Ninjas, but the N-word by 50 Cent and with the Notorious B.I.G. But yeah, there's some interludes on here too, I think, with Will Smith and Martin from the movie. But yeah, very Bad Boy heavy soundtrack here. I had no clue Beyonce was on this until I listened to it, and I was like, I feel like I've heard this, but, you know, I love finding new Beyonce songs. The Justin Timberlake song, again, people who want to be naysayers about Justin and his deservance of his success, he was around the right people. Diddy wasn't just throwing people on this soundtrack. Like, so he made the right friends, unfortunately. So, I mean, you have tons of Loon features, who was a rapper on Bad Boy, who was in I Need a Girl Part 1 and 2 at Diddy, and just making his way around. But yeah, there's plenty of bops on here. I really surprised me. I liked Show Me Your Soul with Pharrell and everyone. That one's very much like Shake Your Tail Feather. Just want to get up and dance. But yeah, I think this soundtrack is better than the first movie. Definitely a step up. Big features, big beats, big stars. I am curious though, how come Will did not make songs for the Bad Boys movies?
I was curious about that too, and I wondered if that was just like P. Diddy's creative vision, where he wanted something a little bit more hard, maybe something that had like, you know, curse words, gratuitous, you know what I mean? Like, and because of Will's like squeaky, very clean style of singing, maybe he didn't think that it was going to fit. Although dialogue wise in this movie contrasts like Will's whole like persona as a rap artist, but I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Write that down as a question that I would love to ask him. But I mean, because when you think about it, I'm pretty sure Will had a big say in, you know, or at least suggestion maybe towards like, oh yeah, Diddy's great, or, you know, or if he wanted to, he'd be like, I want a song on this soundtrack. But I think it's interesting that he didn't feel the need to do that. And again, like you said, this soundtrack is very explicit. Snoop Dogg's song is called Gangsta Shit. Like, yeah. And all kinds of curse. I mean, there's the Realist Ninjas song, Hello. So I'm curious, like, where, if this is like, Will, I don't know. It's just a very interesting dichotomy, because it's like Will up until this point had been very like, you know, I'm clean and I'm projecting this certain image, and I don't think we need to talk like this in records. But then his movie has this fire-ass soundtrack with all of this kind of music on it, so I'm curious.
It's a good interview question.
I was curious, though, to see where Shake Your Tail Feather ranked on, like, the Billboard charts. And so it debuted at number 66 on the Hot 100, but by September, it was number 1 for, like, damn near the whole month into October. So
yeah, that checks out. That really is a true, like, millennial hip-hop classic.
yeah, summertime classic.
It's on the pool parties playlist, baby.
Yes. Anything else you got?
No, I'm happy to turn it over to you for your Jet Magazine pop culture corner.
Yes, of course, Martin and Will are back in Bad Boys 2 and back on the cover of Jet Magazine. I am learning through this journey because these magazines were always like in my grandma's house. Maybe we had a copy of like Essence or something. But like as I go back and flip through these magazines are rather like very, I want to say, I don't know. They're just not very fun. They're not very fun to read. There's no like fun quizzes like which Bad Boys character are you, or you know, like things like 17, a Cosmo or something like that. There are very serious articles in these, a lot of times about like politics and upper society, or you know, Black people in the trenches doing the work or in doing all kinds of stuff. But anyways, Jet has some cool stuff in, well, not cool, but you know, some relevant stuff in it sometimes. So I thought it was great because Serena and Venus Williams played in Wimbledon against each other this year. Serena won against her sister, making her Wimbledon champ for the second time, which is crazy if you know the trajectory of her career. And then we have, last episode we talked about Brandy giving birth to her daughter and the scandal that was her sham marriage, but by this time they are separating, quote unquote, since they weren't really married. So that was news. And then Barry White passed away at 58 in 2003. I didn't realize how young he was to me as a kid.
58.
So yeah, as a kid, so he was old to me. But yeah, R.I.P. Barry White, practice what you preach, baby. We have some allegations against Kobe Bryant for sexual misconduct, which was just everywhere. This was kind of like unheard of at the time and a big deal. And this just spawned so many other pop culture things, like, you know, buying your wife huge jewelry to apologize, which he did to Vanessa. But I don't want to talk too much about that because Kobe's not here, and you know, that's technically old news, but culturally is huge at that time. I don't know if this was in Jet, but there's a picture of a baby fat pink phone, and you know,
I saw that.
Yeah, we talk about the pink Razor being the bad bitch phone, but this is like in other circles, this is like a
designer phone.
Yeah, and there were so many coming out around this time. Like I remember the Juicy Couture sidekick and like stuff like that. So next level on the cell phone game.
Yes.
And then we're gonna move over to Vibe. Guess who's on the cover? Conveniently, Jennifer Lopez is on the cover
Our girl
of July 2003's Vibe, and I didn't pick it just because of that. I mean, it is July, so it's just convenient. But inside of there, we've got some notable Black celeb couples. A lot of them not together anymore. But let's go down memory lane.
Okay.
We have Janet Jackson and Jermaine Dupri, T-Boz and Mac 10, Whitney and Bobby, of course. Common was dating Erykah Badu, Nas and Khalees, Beyonce and Jay-Z. I think they're the only ones. Oh, but Will and Jada also. Those two are the only ones who are still together on here. Usher and Chili, and Kimora and Russell Simmons, who were also on the cover, I think, of Ebony or Essence for this month. But In other news, we have the box office. What movies came out in 2003? Like you said, Legally Blonde 2 came out, so that is one of many sequels this year. Terminator 3, we get Arnold back before he was the Governator.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Pirates of the Caribbean comes out July of 2003. How to Deal with Mandy Moore comes out in 2003. I've never seen that, but I want to say No More Late Fees or Loveful 99 just posted something about that movie. Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life, which is a sequel with Angelina Jolie. Seabiscuit, starring Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man. Tons of Seabiscuit jokes after this. Most notable, the Juno one, where she has to pee like Seabiscuit, like a racehorse. And then Spy Kids 3D Game Over came out. I remember seeing that in theaters with Bad Boys 2.
Did it have the 3D glasses?
Yes, and I tried to keep them. I had floor vents in my room at the time, and that was like my little secret stash spot. But I lost a lot of shit in that floor vent.
Because didn't it just like fall down?
No, it like went to the left. So I think like when the air would come on, it probably blew stuff instead of. Yeah, I don't know. So
in theory, like logic, kid brain, it makes sense to store stuff like in a floor spot.
Yeah.
But
and you know why else I probably did that is in Martin's film Blue Streak. He is a thief and he had stolen a diamond and had taped it to an air duct in this building that later turns out to be a cop building. So he's trying to figure out how he can access this diamond that's been taped inside of an air duct. And so I was like, oh, that is a genius way to hide stuff. In other relevant movie news, how much did this movie cost and how much did it make?
This one had to have had a bigger budget than the first one.
Yes, which I wrote down.
Because you also did. I looked back to see if I did the cost budget, and that you did that for the first one.
Oh, well, welcome back. All right, so Bad Boys, the first movie, had a budget of $19 million.
Okay.
Bad Boys 2, allegedly $130 million budget.
Wow.
So, yes.
I can see
double,
where that budget
triple.
Was spent.
Box office wise, Bad Boys, the first movie, Bad Boys made $15.5 million its opening weekend, and then $141 million as a worldwide gross. Bad Boys 2 opened up with $46.5 million.
Holy shit.
Its worldwide gross was $273 million. And also, I was curious because when we get to House of Larage, this is a point of contention for him. Okay. Bad Boys runs an hour and 59 minutes long. Bad Boys 2 is 2 hours and 27 minutes of reckless stupidity and ridiculousness.
Yeah, it was long. Full transparency, this was my first time seeing it. I know this was not your first time seeing it. No. I needed to take breaks. Needed to pause and take a stretch break.
Understandable. All right. So, what did little Roger Ebert have to say about this movie? Well, also, for you folks out there, there is an Ebert and Roper segment, including Bad Boys 2, where you can see them actually talk about this movie. On his website and in his newspaper, what do you call that? Article, I don't know. Chronicles.
Yeah.
The Chronicles of Ebert. He gives this movie, how many stars do you think, Simone?
I'm guessing 1 or 1.5.
One star. I just wanted to note, because I felt betrayed by Roger, Bad Boys received 2 stars. Wild Wild West so far is the only other 1-star movie that he has given Will. And Legend of Badger Vance is still his highest rated at 3.5 stars.
Oh my God, Roger.
So take that salt and rim your margarita cup, and let's get into let's get into his takes. So in the Roger Ebert and Roper clip, he talks about, how he does like that the captain acknowledges all of the damage to the city, unlike, most movies with this kind of action and whatnot. Like, a lot of us joke about Marvel movies now, like, they save the city, but they destroy it at the same time. So this is a movie that actually is like, damn, y'all fucked up the whole city just for that? Okay. But he does think that the captain chewing them out is redundant. He really does not care for the Reggie date scene where they grill Martin's daughter's date at the door. Doesn't think it's funny. For me, and for probably most Black people, I don't want to speak for all of us, but this is probably one of the most iconic, quotable scenes in the movie. But Roger calls it cruel. Roper calls this movie nasty and mean-spirited and homophobic and grisly. They do not enjoy the destruction of the shanty town at the end. I believe Roper calls it stupid and bloated. And then Ebert says, do they think this is Gone with the Wind in regards to how long the movie is? Moving on to Ebert's Chronicles of Ebert. He starts off his critique, again, ragging on the scene with Marcus and Mike putting pressure on the date. He calls it ugly and notes the needless cruelty took him out of the movie and into the minds of the makers, asking, what were they thinking? He questions if anyone stopped to notice the distastefulness of this movie and questions if they had become desensitized in regards to this and many other things, I'm sure. He goes on to say that Bad Boys 2 is a bloated, unpleasant assembly line extrusion in which there are a lot of chases and a lot of killings and explosions. Oh, it's all done with competent technique. Michael Bay, the director, is a master of this sort of thing, and his screenplay was labored over by at least 4 white writers, although there is not an original idea in it. Even the villain is a bargain basement ripoff of Al Pacino's great drug dealer in Scarface. He also says at the end, there was once a time when a hero would sacrifice his own life rather than injure innocent bystanders. No longer. The heroes of Bad Boys 2 are egotistical monsters, concerned only with their power, their one-liners, their weapons, their cars, their desires. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that characters who wipe out a village can also make cruel jokes at the expense of a kid on his first date. He's not letting this go. Everybody involved in this project needs to do some community service. So yeah, that is Ebert's 2 cents.
Wow, it was so criminal to him. He wants community service. That's
Get out the orange jumpsuits. Or like yellow, like George Clooney.
We know that I love a yellow jumpsuit, baby. I'll join them just so I can wear it. But can I keep this when I'm done? Can we agree that I look fabulous in this?
Simone, since this is your first time seeing this lovely sequel, what did you think of Bad Boys 2 Electric Boogaloo?
After all of the digging of the papers, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That reminded me of the time when I was doing the little like spirograph thing as I was listening, and you're just like, what are you doing? And I'm like, sorry. I'm the worst. I gave the first Bad Boys 2 stars. And this is when I had to, again, take a deep breath and let out a woosah. And I channeled your mantra of just let the movie fucking movie. Stop trying to pick apart. Like, you said this this might have been last week when we were talking about Men in Black 2. And you were talking about how, like, when people pick apart like rom-coms, and you're like, when they're like, oh, they're so cheesy, it's like, well, yeah, no shit, it's a rom-com. Or when they pick apart action films and they talk about like the impracticality of things, it's like, it's not supposed to be this like believable thing. Like, you're in it for the fun action. And I had a bit of a sticker shock when I saw the time frame of how long this movie is. And so for the 2.5 hours practically that this movie was, like I said, I needed to take breaks, but I still enjoyed it. There were a lot of one-liners that made me audibly laugh. I do agree with like the Reggie scene. I think there was just something very strange hearing Will Smith say the N-word so much, because he does not cuss in his rap. So it just felt a little like foreign to me to watch that. And there were some plots that I felt like were a little too diluted, and maybe they should have just like stuck with one like simplicity plot. But for the most part, this is very, very close to how the original, like the first Bad Boys was. So I actually give this one 2.5 pumps, even though it's longer. I still really liked a lot of the lines. There was like there was a moment when they were doing one of the car chases, and Will Smith goes, "Oh, that one made my butthole pucker up a little bit." I love a good butthole joke, and there was lots of butthole jokes in the beginning of the movie with Martin Lawrence getting his buttock shot. I also liked the addition to the cast, which we'll talk about next. I liked the diversity and like the that person in the cast. Don't really agree too much, I think, with the like homophobic undertones of some of the jokes, but unfortunately that's something that was like often very common in this time of movie. And overall, this is Michael Bay just like living out all of his kinks. So that man has a niche, man. So it's like, if he's got the money for it, let him have fun and make a fun movie.
Yeah,
I'd watch it again.
Well, you guys buckle up and prepare like you're driving with Mike Lowry, because I give this movie a solid 4 pumps of butter.
Hey!
Going back for a refill in the tub. I would like to label this probably a Blasic. This probably went triple platinum in the hood. It's probably bootleg to death in 2003. But I have seen this movie plenty of times. This was a DVD we owned. This was in the DVD shelf, right next to the TV console, baby. So definitely would put this on like Too Fast, Too Furious out of where are we going to watch today? Probably me and my nephew watched this a lot as kids over the summer. But speaking of Michael Bay living out his kinks, I think that Mike Lowry is Will living out some of his, because
yes,
in Jet, I think he says, Mike Lowry is like his alter ego, the Miami of the all, being able to put on like tight tank tops and run around and shoot people and be a playboy and all of this stuff. So I didn't really, like, the cursing wasn't jarring for me, but I will say that there was a point when I heard Beyonce say the N-word for the first time, and I was shooketh.
I remember that story. Weren't you, like, in class?
Yes.
You were just like, what?
Yes, and I had to leave. I was like, oh! And then everyone looked at me like, are you okay? But so I get it. Sometimes when people like that, typically, and not that Beyonce was like squeaky clean, like Will really projected himself to be, but just like, you don't expect that from people. Hell, when I curse, people are like, oh my God. So, it is what it is. But I think the Reggie scene, we'll talk about that and why I feel like maybe it's a cultural thing more so than anything, which makes me think too that this movie is a lot blacker than the first movie to me. And I don't really see this as just like a regular action movie. And I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, we don't really have a lot of black action movies and when you think about the first one too, we learned it was never intended for these two. Dana Carvey and John Lovitz, were the intended parties, and then it fell through with them, and they had to make do with what they had. But this movie, you're going in with the success of Bad Boys, the success of Will and Martin again, and knowing that people are gonna probably buy into this franchise. And I think that lends it a different, like, a whole, obviously everything's like double, bigger, faster, crazier, all that stuff. Will is buffer. Martin's a little thicker.
He was buffer. Yeah, both boys got a little thick.
But I think now, you know, the first movie didn't have a solid script. They improvised a lot, but this movie was written with them in mind and all of that. And I'm sure they had some say in some of the stuff as well. There's probably still some improvised stuff in there. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like this was a win for for the people.
I also read, you know, similar articles, and he also had said that in like an NBC interview that he had for this movie, that like Will Smith had said that Mike Lowrey was his alter ego, and that we had even talked about this in when we were listening to Millennium Big Willie Style with the song Miami, and we're like, what's his thing with Miami? Like, he like likes talking about it. And so he was like talking about this in this NBC interview of like, I like Miami, I like the pretty women, I like the food, I like to walk around with like a Glock on my hip, and it's just like a fun alter ego that he was like, I'm never gonna be like that in real life. And he also says that like Mike Lowrey is like the guy that lives inside of me, and it's what Will Smith suppresses to like live a very reasonable life. And so I know too that this movie was a lot less improvised and did have like some more structure to it, and I think that that definitely shows. But overall, Michael Bay, just as a director, and like the making of Bad Boys 2 and some of the like DVD commentary that's out there for the public to find, admires Lawrence and Smith so much and their already like charismatic energy, that even though it had been 8 years since the first movie, that the two of them just like very quickly jumped back into their roles and like didn't really need all that much direction.
Yeah, which is a great way to segue into the trailer, because when I watched this trailer, I actually made notes for once about a trailer. Usually I watch it and I'm like, yeah, whatever. But it's one of those trailers that is clearly just, here's these two guys from this amazing movie you guys love, and here's like all the crazy shit that's gonna happen. And like, no one is seeing this trailer and gonna be like, I want to watch this movie because they think the script or the plot is going to be amazing, or you know that, you know, there's going to be mind-blowing character development with Mike and Marcus. Like, we're on the sequel train. We are here to see familiar faces, to retread familiar scenery. So I mean, there's just chases and explosions, some of the like smaller jokes they say, some of the big stuff, which was nice. Of course, the jokes about how much they fuck up the city is in there. But how much more straightforward or honest can an action trailer to a sequel be, you know? Like,
yeah. You want to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was like, you want to just tell it as it is. You know, we've talked about this before with like, I think in Men in Black 2, this came up that I said that they, and now it sounds like I'm crying. That in Men in Black 2, this came up that they kind of gave away some of their most like more like funnier moments in the trailer, which I think Barry Sonnenfeld was like a little pissed about that like wasn't his choice. But I think Bad Boys 2 is long enough that even, yes, they gave like some of the funny moments away, there was still plenty more. And you know what? After listening to you speak about it and rereading and like reviewing some of this trailer stuff, I'd like to redact my rating. I'm not going to give this a full 4 pumps because that's just me in action films, baby. But I'm giving this 3. I liked this, enjoyed this more than the first, only because I think I knew more what I was getting into this time around. And knowing how much Martin Lawrence and Will Smith had so much fun with each other making this, and I think it's like Fast and the Furious. It's just, it is what it is, and you're either on
No,
the
it is
train.
not.
Oh no, but in the sense that like either you're gonna love the franchise or you're gonna think it's like fucking stupid, like, you know, that kind of thing where it's not 100% like Fast and the Furious. I
Yeah.
get that, but it's like, it's one of those, if you're a fan of action films and you're willing to just like let the ridiculousness stuff go and just have fun with it, then you're all in. And I'm not
Yeah.
100% going to be all in, but I think I was more in for this one than I think was for the first one.
Fast and the Furious just has jumped the shark in my mind, and we haven't had as many of these
Well,
as this. But
agreed. And Fast and Furious like takes it to such an extreme because they know their fan base is so deep that they're like, we can literally get away with anything. Rocket launch cars into space? Why not?
But around this time, Too Fast, Too Furious came out, so we're still in like a very again, big and crazy action movie, but very much, again, just take your brain, put it on the charger, and just enjoy the mindless entertainment being given to you. So, shall we summarize this film for those of us who may not have seen Bad Boys 2?
Sure. All right. So, Bad Boys 2 Electric Boogaloo, released in 2003, is an American action comedy film starring Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, redirected by Michael Bay, who reprised his directing role from the first one, and produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. It is a sequel to the 1995's Bad Boys, which was released also in July. Directed by Michael Bay, reprising his directorial, I think, not debut, but like the first Bad Boys was very early Michael Bay. And I think this movie wouldn't be what it was if it wasn't directed by Michael Bay. This film was released in July 18th of 2003. Were you going to say something?
I think Bad Boys is Michael's directorial debut.
I think so. Something about that feels very right and correct. The partners, who are undercover vice cops in Miami, are out to take down a Cuban drug lord named Johnny Tapia. Tapia is smuggling ecstasy into Miami. The sequel runs much like the first movie, but this time the partners are keeping secrets from each other. Marcus has put in for a transfer to get away from his overbearing partner and just trauma that their job generally takes from day to day. And Mike also isn't being straight with his partner either, because he is secretly dating Marcus's younger sister, Sid, played by the gorgeous Gabrielle Union. There are secrets under secrets because, oh my God, guess what? Sid also isn't who we think she is. She isn't the paper pusher she claims to be, but she's working undercover with the DEA to bring Tapia to justice. Will Mike and Marcus stay friends, or will their secrets tear their friendship and department apart? You will have to watch Bad Boys 2 to find out. Fans of the first Bad Boys will most likely enjoy the sequel, as it is a fairly close beat for beat of the original. This movie is brought to you in part by Michael Bay's kinks of fast car, big waves and speedboats, boobies and explosions, and the early aughts kink of the color blue, green, and red.
The early aughts kink of blue, green, and red?
Yeah, remember how we were talking about with like Enemy of the State, like the late 90s, early aughts had that like obsession with like the techno blue and techno green.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie had a lot of that too.
Yeah, there's a lot of blue early in the movie, when, especially like with the ecstasy stuff. But yeah, and there's obviously red and explosions. So
Agreed.
All right, let's talk about the cast. I mean, obviously we're not going to talk about Will right away. Martin Lawrence, legend, again, back.
And he had a lot going on during this time, right? Like he had done the Night movie.
Oh, Black Knight, yes.
Yes, which I saw in theaters, and then I saw again recently as an adult, and I was like, why did I why was I permitted to see this in theaters? It was like a very advanced movie.
That's another Blasek. I feel like that was just like
There were
randomly
probably
on.
so many jokes that just like
Yeah.
went over my head.
Yeah, Martin had like a bit of like a stumble and a comeback kind of late 90s, I would say early 2000s. He had, I don't know if you saw his interview with Katie Couric, but she asked him about some of his issues and antics. He had done some things in public that people were like, oh, he crazy. But, you know, in hindsight, a la Britney Spears and others, you know, he probably was feeling some kind of pressure. He's also allegedly, you know, in conspiracy theory land, one of those celebrities that people are like, oh, they switched him out because, again, he's a little plumper at this stage in his life. He's not the little short, skinny, big-eared guy. He's a little fuller in his face and body, so people are like, oh, he looks off. He doesn't look like the same Martin. But I don't really. It's like the Avril Lavigne and the Melissa thing. Like, if you want to, I guess.
Yeah.
But the man went through some stuff. So, I mean, people go through things and they change.
Didn't he do like a comedy concert earlier that year, like the year prior, where he like talked about it?
Yeah, so Katie Couric brings that up. His comedy special, Run Tell Dat.
Right.
Which, when she says, she's like, oh, I'm so white. Because she's like, Run Tell Dat. But Run Tell Dat is out, and he talks about some of those things and in a very funny manner. I remember probably inappropriately watching that comedy special, but you know, he's able to bounce back from those things and do Bad Boys 2. Big Mama 2, I believe, comes out in the 2000s. So, you know, I am happy that they were able to get this together. Also, it took so long for them to make this movie because Will was being a very I would say detail-oriented stickler for this has to be right, and he wanted a good script. Yeah. They didn't want to just cash in right away and, like, in the 90s, be like, okay, let's just do Bad Boys 2, and, you know. So there was some thought into this movie, allegedly. But yeah, so, I don't know. Martin as Marcus, I feel like is one of his iconic roles. So I'm always happy to see him back with Will in these movies. Any notes on him?
I mean, I noticed I never like to comment too much on people's like bodies and changes and stuff because having empathy of like knowing how that feels, I'm just like, man, life happens. We can't expect people to like always look how they are. But I noticed that he changed and looked a little different for this movie too. But his character of Marcus still felt very much there. The relationship between his wife Teresa felt a little different, and that like we talked about some of those tropes from the first film that like it felt like he was very connected like with his family, or like that was like a big piece of it, because remember they did like that whole switcheroo where in order to like speak with the drug informant played by Tia Leone, they like Marcus was the one who picked up the phone, and he was the one who was pretending to be Mike Lowry that whole time, and so they kind of had to like life swap and wife swap kind of a little bit. But I mean, overall it still felt like his character was still there, and I thought between him and Will, they shared very equal screen time of like funny lines. Like they felt both equally funny and on par humor wise.
Yeah, and despite what I said earlier, there is some character growth. I think Marcus is definitely that. I think he's the moral compass in this movie.
Yeah.
And seeing him do therapy and trying to utilize some of the tools that were given to him, like the woo-saw, that is a very quotable thing. I definitely say that, and it's because of this movie. But, you know, seeing him try to like de-escalate or wanting to de-escalate situations and not want all of the rah-rah and all of the craziness that Mike seems to thrive in, and wanting to pull back from their partnership because of that, so he could spend more time with his family. Like, his priorities have shifted, and especially probably because he's older. And to talk about his body, I mean, it actually kind of works in terms of his role because he's a dad. He's rocking the dad bod and the dad, like, plaid shirts and whatnot. So I feel like, despite, like, the conspiracy part of it, like, you know, it actually works out for him. Whereas, like, it's kind of understandable that Mike got all jacked and whatnot and is all buffer than he was before. Other cast people, we've got a new Bond bad boys girl in Gabrielle Union, who is kind of replacing Tia Leone's Julie.
Yes, but totally different. And like, I think Julie played that, what did I call, like, distressed sex kitten, like damsel in distress role that couldn't really fight. I mean, she could, I guess, when the time came, but Gabrielle Union, as Sid, at least had that other appeal and layer to it, and that she was also a cop and she was going undercover, and they just so happened to be like busting the same thing, and they didn't really know it quite then. I still feel like her character was underutilized, and I wonder if part of that has to do with, like, Michael Bay and working with women in this movie. But, like, there was one car chase towards the end where she was just like, I'm going to hop out and I'll meet back up with you guys later. I mean, to be fair, Sid did drive that Yukon through that really long chase scene with that, like, semi truck that was carrying all of those other cars on it, and they were like, that whole car chase was incredible, and I was like, is that Yukon made of titanium? Like, it is so amazing that it can still keep going.
Early 2000s cars, indestructible.
Same with that Hummer, man. So, like, so that was really fun to see, like, a woman behind the wheel and having a little bit more screen time and not playing so much of damsel in distress, but rather like a woman who could carry her own.
Yeah, Sid is definitely, not to say that Julie wasn't smart or anything, but you can tell Sid is educated. She's a career woman, and able to hold her own. I will say that one scene where she's like, oh, I'll meet you guys later, is because she didn't want to blow her cover at that point.
Yeah.
So, but I'm wondering if they could have utilized her more. I think if it wasn't for her being undercover, then maybe. But I think that's the big caveat where, like, you know, she's like here and there. And then, of course, she's undercover and Marcus is like, of course they hired you. You look great in a bathing suit. And I mean, whew, yes, she does. So she doesn't completely escape, like, the sexy beauty part of it all, which also around this time, I think when we talked about Men in Black, Die Another Day had come out, which is the Bond with Halle Berry in the infamous, like, peach swimsuit. But yeah, in the same vein of a Bond girl, there is a little bit of tiny bit of damsel in distress, but also, like, skilled woman who can also handle her own and is involved in the plot, not so much, like, you know, the catalyst of the plot like Julie was. But I liked her in this role. And at this time, Gabrielle Union is kind of taking off a bit, I feel like, because she also was in Deliver Us from Eva, I believe, this year. And she's just, like, you know, becoming a household name, at least to me, I felt like, around this time. So this was a good role for her. We've got some familiar faces too. Teresa Randall as back as Marcus's wife, Teresa. She's also very smaller too in this movie. We only see her, I think, twice. Maybe?
Both at, like, barbecue, poolside.
Or like 3 times. I think 3 times. But yeah, not as much as in the first movie.
Definitely not.
Joe Pantoliano is back as Captain Howard, which I think he's in the next movie too, which is great.
Oh, that's good.
we have an amazing connection, 6 degrees of separation here with John Seda, aka Chris from Selena.
I cannot see him without thinking of you now.
He's a cutie.
Yeah, he is a
his
cutie.
hair is short in this movie, so might take a second, but he plays one of Johnny Tapia's like henchmen kind of guys. But
almost made it seem like they were brothers
or like cousins or something, because there's that sick ass scene where Marcus and Mike had gone in and were planting wires and stuff in Johnny Tapia's house, and so he's the guy who like let them in, and so he's like, something's going on, and so of course it's his fault, and so Johnny Tapia just shoots him, but then his mom comes out on the balcony. It's like, oh, what happened to Roberto? And he's just like, oh, he killed himself. And as he's talking, he has a gun in his hand. And she's like, oh, we'll write his mom a nice letter. And, you know, and I'm just like, do you not see the gun in his hand? Like, she is one of those moms who definitely enabled her son and
totally
turns a blind eye and is just like, oh, my Johnny, so great. Isn't he such an inspiration? No.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like they had, because of that, where she's like, oh, will you write his mom a letter and stuff? I was like, are they related or something? The two detectives, I believe, are the same from the first movie. And then there's just a ton of more like police and like DEA agents and henchmen and whatnot and informants. We don't get Michael Imperioli back as Jojo, but we do get a new informant. What is his name? I forget, but he's like Haitian, and that's
Ice
pretty.
Pick?
Yes, Ice Pick.
Yeah.
Yes. John Sally does come back as Fletcher with his thick ass glasses. So that
I can relate.
that's cool. But yeah, there's just a lot of again, diversity, because there's a lot of Latin actors, and I'm assuming, you know, probably some Cuban actors, Cuban Americans, and all kinds of just very colorful cast.
Very colorful. And if I may, colorful in character, not in skin tone, but we have Michael Shannon, who plays the role of Floyd Poteet. He's in like a bunch of stuff. I think he won an Academy Award for the role he was in with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet of Revolutionary Road. But he's been in a bunch of stuff as well.
The KKK member.
Yeah,
you guys.
He played a KKK member, but like you just see his picture and you're like, yeah, I've definitely seen a movie with him in it. The role of Jordi Moya, who played Johnny Tapia, was born in Barcelona, but Michael Bay wanted him to be Cuban, and so they like rewrote his lines in like English and then like Cubano, and they basically gave him like a couple of days to kind of like study his role and change his accent up a little bit. But he's been in a bunch of stuff. I know. And like, you know, acting wise, was it the greatest? No, but like as an overall like drug lord badass, he did the job right. Like he was a spoiled brat, he was an asshole, family man. I don't know.
he was more memorable too to me than the villain from the first movie.
Agreed. I would agree with that. And then there's also Peter Stormare, who plays Alexei, who was like the Amsterdamian German Russian ecstasy drug lord. So that was the weird plot twist that I was like, let's just keep it simple and have like one country dealing with the drugs rather than trying to keep both in there. And then for all you punk fans out there, Henry Rollins, baby, was the TNT leader. And he was the guy who was like, since 9/11, you know, we've had to like watch these guys and we're coming at them and within 3 directions. And Henry Rollins was like really big on the punk scene, was in a lot of like early on punk bands, and definitely a daddy for me.
Or for those of you who would sit at home and watch VH1 all day like me, he was also on I Love the 90s.
Yeah, he was.
which is how I recognize him. I was like, hey, I know him.
Yeah.
Also, why I know who Chris Jericho is. But all right. Well, should we talk about the man of the hour?
I suppose so. I suppose we shall, since this is not the Henry Rollins podcast.
I mean, Henry Rollins, definitely deserving of that time, but
No.
I think
Yeah.
let's talk about Will as
Yes.
Detective Mike Lowry in Bad Boys 2. For me, at least, this movie is definitely... I was thinking about this because I was trying to figure out how I was going to talk about this, because we're definitely going to objectify this man real quick. But this is like... So, Bad Boys, I would say Independence Day, is like a new peak in the mountain range of Will Smith's sexy. Right?
Okay.
And so this Bad Boys, and maybe like, and again, Ali is like coming up into this peak, but
motivational sports hero is like a different kind of a peak for sure.
Well, just because the muscle and the weight he put on for Ali is a lot different than like how he looks in this movie. He's way more cut in this movie and chiseled, and Ali was very more like a mass of muscle and man.
Yes.
So yeah, we're on a new peak of Will Smith hotness. This is like starting into, to me at least, like he looks very grown man sexy. And before, like Bad Boys 1 and Independence Day, he was younger. He was like the young gun and very much, you know, youthful. Not that he's old here, but you know, it's just a different stage in life of sexiness. So
I mean,
good stuff.
Looking at the picture of your backdrop, like his muscles are flexed. You see veinage in the I mean, what a turn from his early films. I mean, Where the Day Takes You, he's like not in it a lot, and he's also sitting down. He's like wheelchair bound, right? But like the next movie of Made in America, Where the Day Takes You, he's like so, because Will Smith's a tall guy. He's 6'2". And so there's, you know, the taller you are, the more like proportion you have to like store things around your body, right? And so I just noticed, I think you're right. In Ali, he had pushed past the 200-pound mark purposefully to like match Ali's body weight. But that tended to be more in like the core and arms. And this seems to be more like evenly distributed throughout the body. And I know I just said like, I don't like talking about blah, 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 blah. That's more about like, I never want to like fat shame anyone, but I will sexually objectify.
And muscle worship.
And muscle worship for sure. Yeah, I noticed that too. And Will Smith, like, not everyone looks good in a goatee, but he makes it work.
Yeah. And not every, too, this is also the era of the muscle tank.
Yes.
I totally forgot this, but I had looked at like the top, not the top, I guess, yeah, the number one R&B hip-hop hits of 2003. And guess what was in there? In the Club by 50 Cent. So, you know, he also helped usher in that tank top look, hence why I'm wearing a tank top today, even though my guns are not as nice. Oh my God, are you on
dress code? I didn't know this was a spirit day.
I tried to blend in a bit with their look, their SWAT team-esque look. But
had I known, I would have dressed that for the assignment.
I don't know. I just felt like I changed a few times. I was like going very like Captain Howard kind of cheesy aloha shirt and bucket hat, and then I was like, this looks ridiculous. Anyways, but you know, he's wearing tank tops in this. He is shirtless at the end, the credit scene when they're in the pool. So no shirtless running scene this time. But yeah, so let's actually talk about his acting in this movie. I feel like I said, I actually think that Martin and Marcus had more growth in this movie. I do think there's a little bit of growth with Mike, given, you know, Sid, and we're seeing him actually kind of in a relationship, although I have some questions about that. I feel like it's not that clear. But yeah, he's still hot-headed. He's still shoot first, ask questions later. He's still fast cars, beautiful clothes, and women. Like, I mean, don't hate the play, hate the game. So I feel like this is just leveled up, level of Mike Lowry in many senses. And I think too, like how Will talked about on Oprah, like getting in really good shape for Ali, gave him this very strong sex drive. And I feel like he channeled that newfound sex drive and sexiness into Mike in a different way in this movie. So not to go back on his body or anything, but I do feel like you get like a stronger sense of like confidence and like, I'm the man sort of thing, especially like when he comes out with that lovely blue suit with the pink lining and Marcus is like, what are you, a model? Like, what is it? It's like, what? I like to look good. Like, I just threw something on.
Don't hate the player, hate the game, as you just said.
Yeah. Whereas in the first movie, I feel like you could tell he was trying to be the cool guy, which when you see his high school picture, you kind of understand like where that comes from. He seems like he was like a nerd in high school and like he might be overcompensating for that a little bit. But yeah, I think this was standard Will Smith fare in some senses.
Yeah.
But leveled up. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely seemed to be a little bit more maturity, but at the same time still having that hot-headed, trigger-happy kind of cop. But I think that's what makes their duality between their partnership work. Like you have to have, I guess similarly to Men in Black, you have to have someone who's like the straight, narrow rule follower, and then the one who's just like, fuck the rules and let's kind of like make it up as we go. The movie opens up really strong. We're not going to walk this through like plot by plot, but the movie it starts off with a bang, first of all, with an ecstasy lab in Amsterdam. And then next scene is like, the techno blue and green credits. Then it's a KKK meetup with Marcus and Mike, who are like undercover, who are busting the meetup, and just I thought that was a choice, but their lines were so funny that it like took me out of some of the like uncomfortableness. And I know that at this point, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence for sure had enough star power that I don't think they would have done anything or said anything if they didn't feel like if it was going to be right for the movie. And that scene kind of reminded me of the first one, or in the first movie, where like, we're just here to borrow a cup of sugar. And so I think Will Smith, I don't want to say Will Smith his way, because Mike Lowry is not Will Smith. It's like this alter ego version of Will Smith, but you can definitely tell that he has a lot of fun. He's always the one behind the wheel driving the car, and he, I think, really deeply cares for Marcus, but he can't always understand everything he's going through since he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have kids, and talking about childless millennial. But I think that you see his character grow throughout the film, like gaining empathy for his partner and gaining empathy for the tough stuff that they deal with as a department and as a team. And I liked that. I think it kind of like not projected, carried their characters through like the end of it. And it kind of brought me back to Money Train a little bit. And I think we might have talked about Money Train for a hot second in talking about the first Bad Boys, but with Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson in Money Train, kind of had that same like back and forth banter, but this banter didn't seem as like drawn out. Like there were definitely parts of the movie that felt long that I was like, this probably could be cut a little bit down a little bit, but not the scenes that they were together, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about the length of this movie and what could be cut maybe, or what, whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I don't mean to say that Will just like willed himself through this movie, but there's not a lot that's like a reach in this movie. I feel like for him, this was probably one of those movies that it's like fun to show up to work and
yes,
do all this stuff. Maybe the physicality of, the stunts and all that stuff, but in terms of like dialogue and whatnot, it's not like how for Enemy of the State he was like, this was kind of tough for me to like not be funny and just be serious and dramatic. So
I totally agree with that. That's what I should have led with, was that it was clear that he had fun doing this role.
Yeah. But I have no qualms about him as Mike Lowry. Part of me, not that I don't like him with Marcus, but like I would have been curious to see like him branch off from this without Marcus, just to see like if it could have gotten crazier. I'm just thinking of like The Rock when he joins Fast and the Furious. Not that I've seen it, but I know that
it switches shit up though.
Yeah, but that he gets his spinoff with Hobbs and Shaw, and that's like a totally different kind of. I just feel like Marcus grounds Mike, and so I would like to see him like on a solo mission would be interesting, because he doesn't have, Marcus where he's and I do think that Mike considers Marcus's family and his safety and well-being. It's just like, bro, we gotta get through this. Let's get through this. I have your back. Like, calm down and like let's just handle business. I have your back, and stop worrying so much, and not so much like, oh, I don't give a fuck if you live. Like, we're going to jump off this cliff and, like, I'm going to get the thrills that I want. Like, I don't think his motivations are that, or especially when they're bickering about, like, during the chase scenes and all that, and the gun fights where, Mark is like, I think this has to be the record for the most gunfights in a week, or,
Yeah.
And he's like, or they're driving and he's like, can you shut up and just let me drive? Like, he's just like, I got you. Like, I have your back. You're my brother. We're bad boys for life. We're in this together. So don't worry so much.
We ride together and we die together.
Yeah. And don't worry so much about the dying part. Like, I'm going to try to make sure that doesn't happen as much as possible. But, like, maybe if you calm down, some of this other shit wouldn't be happening so bad. Like, if you calm down and back at them, then we'd be all good. So, I don't know. I feel like Mike is, like, a hothead, but not as much as...
But maybe not so much as, like, a player in this one. Because in the first one, he wasn't... Well, I don't know. Like, in the first movie, he wasn't in a relationship, really, and he had the, like, bachelor pad, and that was what, like, was established when, like, Marcus took Julie over and stuff because he was pretending to be him. Now, he is with Sid, and he's still, like, a flirt and a pretty boy for sure, but he's not so much as this, like... He's, like, hot-headed, but, like, more mature, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about him and Sid, because as a kid, like, watching this movie, like, I bought into, like, them dating and, like, ooh, it's a secret, all that stuff. But the end scene with them in the pool makes me question, like, how serious he thought it was. Because, for one, they apparently seem to live apart. It's not like Sid lives in Miami, and they had met up on a fluke in New York, which sounded like a good time. And, you know, he was supposed to be there for like a day or something, and he wound up staying for a while longer because I'm guessing they were making some things happen. Which not that this movie needs a sex scene, but I'm just saying, like, these two are very beautiful people. I wouldn't be mad at it. I'm sure Jada would, but yeah, like, I just feel like maybe it just didn't seem like he was clear on what was happening between them as much as she did, like, because she was like, oh, you didn't tell him about New York, and then even when he was like, well, you know, like stumbling through trying to tell Marcus, she was like, we're dating. And then he was just like, okay.
So it's almost as if he believed it was just more of like a hookup in New York, and she's like, no, we're dating.
That's how I feel. Like, especially because in the end, in the pool, he's like, you know, me and Sid, as much as that could have been great, or, you know, I wish we could see where that would go, we decided that maybe, you know, it's just better if we're not in a relationship, basically. And then Marcus is like, so you just, again, fooled around on my sister. Like, you got what you wanted, and now you're bouncing. And so that part really sold me on the, like, maybe he wasn't that into it. But then you have also the end where he was, which I feel like is two things, is that yes, he probably cares about her. For one, he's probably known her since as long as he's known Marcus in some capacity, because they grew up together. And two, like, obviously you want to help your friend find his sister, but this is a woman that you were romantic and intimate with, so yes. But like the kiss in the minefield and all that stuff, like, I don't know, I felt like this should have went further, and the fact that they broke up at the end of the movie felt cheap. I was just like, we went through all of that, and now it's just like, yeah, you know what, we're not gonna date. It's just probably for the best.
Shoot, I didn't even pick up on that, to be honest. It's not like I wasn't paying attention, because I was, but by the end of it, I made a note, like, by the time that they were like crashing through all of those like makeshift towns in Cuba in the yellow Hummer, that I was just like, I'm not going to really like pick apart the plot anymore, and that there's just so many things going on that I'm just going to like enjoy it for what it is at this point, that I think I just didn't even pick up on that. I wonder if that was because they weren't sure if they were going to do a Bad Boys 3, and they weren't sure if they were going to be able to like weave that story into the plot, and they were just trying to like do like a CYA move early.
Yeah.
Damn.
I don't know, because I haven't seen Bad Boys for Life. It came out during the pandemic, and so I don't know, when I heard that they were making Bad Boys for Life, like, I didn't think about this until I rewatched it today, like, him and Sid, but, like, in my mind, when I heard that they were coming back, I was like, oh, I wonder if he's still with Sid, and I believe she's not in this movie, so, but that kind of bummed me out, because I was like, oh, why wouldn't Gabrielle Union come back, but, you know, which I think could have been, like, a great character growth again for Mike. I'm wondering, at this point, he's in his 50s, doing the same shit, it seems like, still endangering poor Marcus and still sleeping around, like, so I don't know, I thought it would have been dope for him to like kind of marry into this chosen family and like pop out a kid or two with Sid and like maybe calm down a bit, but we'll see when we get to Bad Boys for Life. Okay. I do think that Will was still funny in this movie, but I feel like the structure of it like kind of didn't lend for some of the organic funny moments that were in the first one, you know? You can tell that there were definitely like plotted funny moments, like I love the scene where Marcus is on ecstasy and they're trying to get the warrant, and Will is just like, stop, like, what are you like trying? It's like, oh Captain, look at this, like, what, like, that was, I feel like, one of their better scenes together. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the Reggie scene, because I think that scene is one of the funnier scenes in the movie, but apparently doesn't go over well with everybody. Poor little Raj, probably clutching his pearls.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the thing added to that was that the actor who played Reggie didn't know that they were going to use a gun in the scene, but they had also told him, you can look at this at like IMDb facts and stuff, but they had warned him ahead of time that like don't look Martin Lawrence in the eye, and on the other hand of that, Martin Lawrence was like really mean to him, like kind of purposefully on set to kind of set that tone. I thought it was a little too like the trope of like a cop dad dating a daughter maybe might have been taken to a little too much of an extreme, but it was still funny. I still thought it still made me laugh.
Yeah. I mean, in real life, I hate this kind of misogyny, to be honest. Like, I have a niece that's 18, and so wanting her to feel like, and this is not my responsibility, it's her parents, but just, you know, even with her brother, like where he'll say things and be like, you can't go out, or like, it's just like that whole tone of like policing women differently you would your son. Like if Reggie was Marcus's son and he was going out, they'd be having a different conversation with him than they would him dating a daughter. But I think in the movie, I think the biggest thing for me why I don't really take offense to the scene that much is because I think more than anything, this is a moment of connection in a weird way for Marcus and Mike, because prior to that is like when Marcus tells him, I put in my paperwork and I can't do this anymore. It's just like he broke up with him.
Yeah.
And so Mike came over and was like, hey, is it cool if I come in and stuff? It's like, oh yeah, you know, so-and-so's getting ready for her date. Like, and so this is like a weird bonding moment for them where it's like, okay, let's fuck with this dude and do what we do best and just like do that whole back and forth arguing, like going back to the first movie when they're getting carjacked and they start arguing and then the robbers are just like, what's going on? Like, give me the car, like, shut up. And so this reminded me of that, and I feel like it was just them like fucking around, and sorry it was at the expense of this teenage boy, but you know, they also put some very important points out there. Like, ain't no fucking going on tonight. You better have her back at 10. I do think there were probably some over-the-top moments with, like, at the end, Will being like, you ever had sex with a man before? Would you like to? Like, that was kind of, like, cringy. And the gun part.
Yeah, I think wasn't that also, like, implied that, like, if he tries anything that they're gonna, like, send him to jail or something?
Yeah, that's what I got from it. Or at least that Will had been to jail and had seen some shit, and you don't want to see the shit that he had seen. I don't know. But seeing, too, Will out of his element in that kind of tone, I think probably was interesting for a lot of people as well. Because, again, so far in none of these movies have we seen him talk like that or act like that or take on that kind of persona as a black man. And so it's like that, I feel like, has so many layers into how we present ourselves sometimes as black people. And I don't think it's easy for Will, and as someone who kind of relates to him in terms of like wanting to be, I don't want to say respectful because that's buying into respectability politics, but that's something I had to learn and like be like, you know what, actually that's not okay. Like, I don't need to act a certain way for certain people to think I'm respectable. Like, that's bullshit. But that's like what we've gotten with like all the Oscar stuff is like, oh no, he slapped somebody. And it's like, that was in him all the time. He's just had his customer service voice on for so long.
His Disney voice.
Yeah, like people were taken aback and stuff, but
he unleashed his Mike Lowry that night.
Huh? Oh, yeah. But, like, I feel like him saying the N word and all of that, like, all that cursing and all that stuff as Mike, like he said, this is, like, someone that's probably, like, inside of him that is suppressed, and that's to say that, like, it's in him, and he probably says that shit all the time at home or with his boys or growing up. But how you choose to present yourself to the world, especially as a celebrity, is a choice, and is a choice that affects your career and all these things. And he made a choice early on to not curse and to be a little more even keel and ride that bridge of, like, white people are going to find this funny and black people and everyone in between are going to find this funny. And I think that this movie is actually probably the first movie where he's not attempting to do that. Like, it's especially too, I think, because when you look at Men in Black, Enemy of the State, Wild Wild West, Independence Day, these are all movies that are co-led by other white men and him. This is, like, the only movie where his partner is also black. So there is no toning down the blackness in this movie. Like, and I think that's too why I gave it 4 pumps. But
that is a really good point. So it's almost as if he's not acting in this movie. He's just releasing his inhibition, feeling the rain on his skin, if you will.
Yes. Getting his Natasha Bedingfield on. Which is why, I mean, should have talked about this with his music career, but I've seen him say things about, like, not cursing and wanting, and the desire to want hip hop to be more than what it was becoming at that time. And I understand where he's coming from, but I think again, he said that, you know, this is something, or an alter ego in him that he suppresses. And there's something beautiful about black people who can be unabashedly themselves and not suppress that. And I think that hip hop's come so far that really was on the wrong side of that argument. Like, there's just all kinds of shit that's in rap now. But I don't know, like, that his desire to not curse and not rap in his music isn't so much, to me, I felt like, I don't think it's about policing all of rap or other people, but also, like, there's times and places for some of those things sometimes. And, like, this movie, this is a time and place for that to happen. Now, if he was busting out the N-word in Wild Wild West or in Men in Black with Tommy Lee Jones, like,
could you imagine?
You know, then it's just like, okay, we're stereotyping this black character in a way that's not beneficial either. But, like, these are two dudes who grew up together and are boys, and so it's probably just natural, like.
Yeah. And I think too, this is not made for kids. Men in Black and Wild Wild West definitely had, like, that kid, like, audience, right? And so Michael Bay really wanted to make sure that this, like, movie was a hard R. He was like, I'm tired of being, like, held by the restraints of having to conform to this, like, PG rating, that he was like, I'd rather just have it go all out and be an R than anything else.
Yeah. Which, too, like, I have the making of Bad Boys, like, paused, and it's on the KKK bust scene, and going back to, like, you know, that they wouldn't have done anything in this movie if they wouldn't have wanted to, you know. I don't see that scene as, like, cringy and negative in the way that we look at Django. Like, it's this, like, redemption story, and this, like, we have the power in this one instance, you know, and I think it's so dope to see, even though probably unpractical, that he was able to just, like, pounce up and flip open the robe, because I'm like, how did he stand like that all night without it not like peeking open or blowing open or something? But it's a great movie, like shot of him like just coming out and like both guns, and the rotation of it all, and Marcus as well, and them being able to be like, ha, like we're the cops, we're in charge, and you guys need to freeze and don't move. And
you can exercise your right to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, and I can talk all the shit I want back to you, and what are you gonna do about it? I have a gun and I have a badge, which is usually not the case for us. It's the opposite. So I feel like that scene, they were probably okay with doing it because of that. And what else? I do want to talk about them driving through the shanty town, because like I never had put too much thought into that, but I was like, when I was reading Lil Raj's thing, I was like, damn, that is kind of fucked up. But in the movie too, they're like, this is where they make the drugs. So then, it's like, how bad do we feel for drug makers? But at the same time,
I'm sure not everyone in this town did.
Well, I'm just wondering if that area did, but again, in those kinds of countries, like it's just like any kind of factory job, or like quote unquote low level job of just like people trying to make money and make ends meet, and in that country, if that's what is accessible to you, then that's probably what you're gonna do. So not to shit on those drug makers, they weren't Johnny Tapia, but his house got fucked up too, which is great. But that was like a moment of suspension of disbelief for me, like I wasn't thinking too hard about like, oh shit, there's probably like people in these houses, like, or like they're just driving through people's homes and with no disregard
over little landmines, just like explosions.
Yeah, so I mean, that part was, now I'm gonna watch that differently probably from now on. I'm just like, oh Dios míos, like
yeah, well, that, and when the captain was like, oh, you're lucky that no cops died in the first car chase with like the guy with the long blonde dreadlocks and the like semi truck that had the truck that carries the other cars and stuff. He's like, you're lucky that no cops died. And I was like, how? Because there were cars doing flip-de-doos and driving straight in fire and like 360 gainers off of another car and crashing and exploding. And I was like,
yeah,
I definitely saw cop cars like flip over and on fire. So unless they survived that lowered my suspension of disbelief. But by that point in the film, when they're driving through the towns in Cuba after they had already like exploded, for lack of better words, Tapia's house, that I was like, I'm not gonna pick apart the suspension of disbelief at this point.
Yeah. And to the chase scene with the dead bodies like rolling out and stuff.
Yeah.
And even them like going into the morgue, like the scene with the large breasted corpse, and
they called her Bimbo.
Yes, which not so great. And a very cheap like titty shot in a movie, like to have like dead titties and to be like under the covers with Martin like side by side, just like like I don't know, like part of me like buys into that cheapness, but then part of me, 2020 me, is just like, this ain't right. Like,
see, I can let that shit go because that happens in horror movies all the time. That's their like cheap shot, is like some big boobied girl.
Yeah. So I don't know, I felt bad about that, but like that whole like morgue scene too was pretty funny because it made me remember like when they go to that house, and the dead body is there, and Marcus is like, and Mike's like, don't do that shit, like suck it up. And it was just more of that kind of humor. But again, the same beat but like leveled up and like a different plot line too. So I thought it was funny how like squirmish he was. And like I think I would be him in a lot of these situations. Like he's like the Danny Glover of this duo.
Too old for this shit.
Yeah, he's just not with the shits. Like I'm curious why he ever wanted to be on the drug task force anyways. Like it seems like maybe he should have just been like your friendly neighborhood cop, like just, doing his like nice little beat and calling it a day and going home, not doing drug bust and all that kind of stuff. What else in this movie?
The rat sex. They fuck just like us.
As a kid, I thought that was hilarious. And as an adult, like I was like, that was a forced bit because we all know animals get it from behind. They're not doing missionary. Like,
yeah, that part was funny. So in that scene, they Marcus and Mike are going to Tapia's house in Miami, and they're like bugging and wiring his home, but they're undercover as like pest control. Now they didn't know because they were like they had already listened to his phone conversations, and so they knew that he needed pest control, but they didn't think it was going to be rats. They were thinking like cockroaches and bugs. And so little do we know that Marcus has like a big problem with rats, because I don't remember that coming up in the first one.
No.
And so Marcus has like this big problem with rats, and Mike leaves him to be the one in the attic to like set up the upstairs wires while he does the downstairs wires. But it's just so funny. He was just like, oh my God, they're fucking just like us. They fuck just like us. And like there's just these two little like Muppet rats that are like looking at the camera, which again, I was like, wow, really? But at the end of the day, I was like, okay,
it's a cheap laugh.
It's
yeah.
a cheap laugh. It's funny.
I want to know who built
the
that
puppeteer.
puppet. Because talk about a job.
Yeah.
But that was funny. And into the fact that he's like radioing him. He's like, Mike, these two rats are... And he's like, Marcus, like, can you just plant your fucking wires? And like, also, I'm trying to like sneak around this mansion and not get killed and do my shit. Like, but yeah, that was funny too. I do want to talk to you about you pointed out like the Russian club owner guy kind of being like another plot line too many.
Oh yeah, so it's, I mean, I guess they got the ecstasy from Amsterdam, but then we're smuggling them in between the US and Cuba, question mark. I just feel like it would have been easier if they just picked one bad person to focus on.
Yeah.
And because Alexei was not really given too much screen time, like it's very obvious that Johnny Tapia is the true antagonist of this film, that it just confused me why they added this second layer of like a lesser drug lord working underneath. It probably could have, I think, just benefited the plot if they just had Johnny Tapia as the main villain in this movie and not have this like second drug pusher. Although, to be fair, it seemed like Sid was maybe working with both as the like DA drug informant, but then ended up like more working with Tapia as like the right hand woman, I guess, if you will. One thing that just kind of cracked me up was their choice in using ecstasy, because I've never done it, but I just remember that like in the late 90s and early aughts, ecstasy was such a popular drug that we heard about it a lot. We heard about it in movies and pop culture, and this was kind of in the era where like raves were a really big deal, and you know, people would drop E and like go to a club or go to a rave and dance. And so they were I just kind of made it in my note like, oh, remember when ecstasy was like a big deal? Or like it just seemed like at this point in time this was like everywhere, that if this movie was to be remade, ecstasy wouldn't be the main drug that would be pushing. It'd probably be like fentanyl or like some other kind of like prescription drug that's a lot more addictive and like mentally debilitating to a person.
I think choosing ecstasy kind of helps a bit with this movie because of like the party nature of it. It's not like crack or even the way I said crack, like crack. It's not like crack or heroin or meth where it's like these really serious drugs that really fuck up people in their lives, and like ecstasy, like cocaine, is kind of considered a designer drug, a party drug, where, you know, oh yeah, we're going to a club, let's do a line, let's drop some E, or kind of like Molly is now, where it's just like, oh yeah, I just casually take some Molly and have a good time. So like the club scenes and all that stuff, which is where that character comes into play a lot. I think his role doesn't need to be removed, but it probably could have been smaller, because essentially he's just the dealer.
Yeah.
Johnny Tapia is the supplier. He's the plug. And what's his name? Alexei is just the dealer. He's a means to distributing ecstasy because he has a club. So I think that's why he was in there initially, is because they, you know, you have to, okay, where are these pills coming from? Okay, boom, we found this guy in his club. Okay, but who's his supplier? Who's he getting the pills from? And then boom, that's where it's like, okay, that's Johnny Tapia. And usually in the war on drugs, at least what I've seen and watched on documentaries and specials and whatnot, is that, you know, busting dealers, great way to, you know, pat yourself on the back maybe, but at the end of the day, if you're not getting the supplier, then guess what, they're just gonna hire some other punk to distribute their drugs. So the bigger catch is to get the supplier and shut them down, basically kill them at the root, chop off the head of the beast. And so by taking out like someone like Alexei or like the Haitians, you're just chopping off some toes that might regrow. You gotta kill him when it hurts. So I think Alexei could have been smaller too, because to me he should have been in the vein of like the Haitian guys and, you know, their shenanigans.
Yeah.
But yeah, other fun fact, since we were talking about clubs, Megan Fox is in this movie, which I had talked to Danielle about this, and she's like, oh, you gotta talk about that. And I'm happy to talk about it, but Megan Fox does talk about this on Jimmy Kimmel and how she felt like at a young age she was sexualized. I will say though, watching the movie, I was looking out for her, and I was just like, did I miss it? Like, did I miss this scene? Because it's supposed to be this scene of her in the club under this waterfall. And again, I'm thinking hypersexual. But it happens so fast. And again, it's the club. It's like blue tinted. She has on a cowboy hat. Someone on YouTube has cut just her scene out. And it really is so small that I would have never noticed it probably. But yeah, Michael Bay, shame on you, especially given how you treated her on Transformers as well.
I know.
But it is kind of small, and I don't want to say it's not relevant or that it's not as sexual as I thought it was, but I think it's more important probably how she felt. And I can only imagine being 15 and wanting to act and being like, sure, I'll do that. And then in hindsight, being like, you know what? That was really not okay. Like, someone should have said no.
Right. And also, this might have been that, like, precedence of why they might have picked her in this role was to, like, possibly groom her for further roles, which just makes everything feel icky when you hear about young girls being groomed in Hollywood. It never makes anyone feel good.
Boo. Sorry, be a downer on that.
No.
Fun fact. But I think we've done Bad Boys 2 due diligence. It's just, again, like I said, at the top of the hour. 2 hours, probably. It's reckless, stupid, and dangerous. And, just unplug your brain and let it charge for a minute and enjoy some explosions, car chases, and inappropriate 2003 jokes.
Agreed.
Is there a drink you have in mind for this movie?
So originally I was going with an MGD because there's that like iconic moment where Sid steps out of the back of this like Miller, it's a Miller beer, Miller's Gold. What's
Genuine draft?
Thank you. And MGD because like she's like in this truck and it looks like that's the like what they're shipping was this beer, but then she steps out of the back in this like white power suit and I'm like, I love that. But then there's another scene with Gabrielle Union, aka Sid, on the beach with Johnny Tapia, and she's like, I got you a Bacardi mojito, and she like name dropped Bacardi. And I think that goes better with the Miami thing. So I'm going a Bacardi mojito for this one.
Nice.
My snack inspired for this film more goes along the lines of where we are. One of the big plots was that Tapia ran his like storefront for smuggling drugs and money to and from Cuba was through this like funeral home service, and he would like stuff these John Does or Jane Does with drugs, and then underneath there, what
does this have to do with your snack?
Hear me out. And the underneath was like the money, and so there was like a pun where they called them like fat boys or like fat doughs or stuffed doughs or something.
Uh-huh.
And then that made me think of just like a really big sandwich. So, I want a really big sandwich and a Bacardi mojito when I'm eating this movie.
All right. I mean, I can see like the casket of a sub sandwich, like the open and shutness of it all. But dead bodies don't make me hungry. So I was just like, where are we going with this? Hannibal Simone. My drink, I'm going cheesy, classic, tropical pina colada, especially after a stressful ride like this one. Like, I just want to be chilling, relaxing, all cool in Miami. Okay. So pina colada is my drink. And then I wanted to say a Cuban sandwich because that's my Miami track record. But Marcus is always having family barbecues, and Mike is like, my next partner is going to invite me to their family barbecues. So I'm going family barbecue fare with like maybe some ribs, tater salad, some maybe a nice little burger, a little hot link off the grill, a little appetizer or something. But yeah, curious to see which one of these guys could barbecue better. They probably have people to do that.
Like a Grill Masters
challenge.
Yeah.
The Gauntlet, Bad Boys, Grill Masters. And yeah, is that it?
I suppose that's it. That's Bad Boys 2 Electric Boogaloo.
We do it for fun. That's right, people. We do this for fun. No money involved whatsoever. That's not to say sponsors you can't call knocking. But
Taco Bell, I'm still waiting to hear from you.
Taco Bell, we just dropped Miller Genuine Draft in here. Bacardi. I mean, you could sponsor our cocktail book. I'm just... Hello. Opportunity. So, we would like to thank you all for listening to this week's episode, and to the people who stuck and ride and died with us so far. Please come back for another episode of the Miami-Dade version of Inside the Actors Studio.
But seriously, if you like us enough to stick around, buckle up, friends, because we're going to take another deep dive down this IMDb rabbit hole next week as we discuss Will Smith in the sci-fi action film I, Robot.
And on that note, if you've got nothing better to do, go figure out a theme to watch a bunch of movies and sequels you've never seen.
Right? I'm your host, Simone. Subscribe to This Blessed Mess, and Bacardi and Taco Bell, hit us up if you're into it.
It's a hell of a combo.
It's a hell of a combo, but you know what? I can put a little splash of Bacardi in my Baja Blast.
I knew you were gonna say that. And I'm your host, Bria, and it would be awesome for you to wipe off that trigger finger before you dip it in your popcorn bucket. And give us a review. Follow us at Roll Call Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and I should be on Twitter again by the time this comes out. And also you can find our episodes on YouTube if you'd like. But yeah, follow us. Slide in our DMs. Let us know what you think about the episodes. And check out our merch on Redbubble. And so this has been another episode of
Roll Call and Cut.